All right, welcome to this edition of the Best of podcast series. This one is a doozy, and I want to offer a little bit of a trigger warning here because we're diving into sexual abuse, sexuality, and sexual coercion in an intimate, committed relationship. And this can be triggering, especially if this is what you're experiencing, which many women that I have coached and worked with over the years, this is something they have experienced. And maybe you've experienced childhood abuse in your past, where you had sexual abuse in your childhood. And so now you're already, just from experiencing that, at risk of getting into abusive relationships, back-to-back abusive relationships because of your history and trauma. So when we talk about trauma, childhood sexual abuse, that would be a trauma. There's typically PTSD attached to that type of trauma. And that really is related to the circumstances around the abuse that happened, what kind of aftercare you received, what kind of empathy, support, and intervention you received at the time. And so many of us who have experienced something like this, there wasn't any of that. It was often swept under the rug and just let's carry on. Or you may not have ever felt safe in disclosing the things that happened. You didn't have a safe place. Maybe you were gaslit and it was minimized, or you were blamed, or you felt so ashamed that you never actually said anything to anyone. So there's various different ways that this can go about. But the thing is that this is one of those traumas that will keep showing up in an intimate relationship until you resolve it within yourself. This doesn't mean you need to go digging in the closet for memories and looking for traumas. This is about coming back into your body and being fully connected to your body and your body sensations, what you like, what you don't like, your boundaries, your sexual boundaries, the touches you like, the touches you don't like, the ways you want to be treated. And many of you are tolerating so much around this area in your relationship, and it's just re-traumatizing you and re-traumatizing the unhealed aspects. If you experienced this at all in your childhood, maybe it was in your teen years, maybe it was something that happened with a boyfriend or someone that you dated. It could be any of those pieces, but I'm more talking about childhood sexual abuse leaves an imprint that is very difficult to heal. And if you're in a relationship that is not safe and you are experiencing sexual coercion, which we're going to get into, then you are just you're not re-triggering them. It is being re-triggered by what is happening in the relationship. But don't get this confused with you actually have a reason to feel triggered in this particular relationship because you're experiencing more abuse. That's very different than if you're in a safe relationship with someone who truly does want to assist you in healing and wants to be part of that journey with you, and they're willing to work with you and they're willing to be part of that. It's very different. But you're not going to be able to heal within a situation that is opening those wounds over and over and over again. That's the reality. You cannot heal this in an unsafe relationship because it's such a vulnerable thing. Our sexuality is such a sacred, vulnerable thing that if you are trying to heal this within a relationship that is continuing to harm you, you're just re-traumatizing yourself. And then women experience pelvic issues, period issues, other issues in the, in our womb space. And this also shows up in our money and our relationship to money and feeling powerlessness. We have to be able to heal that, but you won't be able to heal that fully within a dynamic that is opening and creating new wounds around this. So I just wanted to add that in here. And a few things to remember. If this is what you're experiencing, you're not alone. And there's a lot of shame in this. A lot of women who are experiencing this don't have anyone to talk to because they're minimized, or they're told, oh, men will be men, or men just need sex, or men this or men that, and women never want sex. Women don't like sex. That's the rhetoric, right? I don't believe that's true. I think women love sex, but we don't love it when our needs aren't being met, or when we're not being respected, when we're not feeling the turn on because of the relationship dynamic. Women need a lot more. Men don't need much to get there. Women need a lot more. We also need emotional safety. We need to have our needs and boundaries honored. And when that's not happening, then your vagina speaks to you. And it might be telling you, no, this person is not safe. We're not going there. Some women have painful sex because everything clenches up and tenses up. You might have recurring vaginal infections or just pain with intercourse. So these are all signs of something more. Definitely get checked out by a doctor, absolutely. But let's not ignore how crucial it is to be mindful of how you're opening yourself up in the most vulnerable and sacred way, and to who. Who are you giving this gift to? We're in our most vulnerable position when we're naked and we have our legs open, right? We're literally allowing another person to enter into our body. So we have to take responsibility for what we allow and don't allow. So when I'm coaching women and they're in this type of relationship and their spouse is pressuring them and making them feel guilty because they don't want to have sex, and they start setting boundaries and saying no, this often escalates the abuse. This often increases the conflict and starts creating more anxiety. And this is where women might, if they're not already, want to sleep in a separate room. They want to be away because maybe their spouse is continuing to pressure them. So you have to draw a line in the sand and realize your body is sacred. Your body is your body. It is not his body. Nobody has the right to your body. Period. Whether they're married to you or not, it does not matter. It really is about, is this person safe for me? And this starts with, if you have experienced some kind of violation, it starts with you saying, we're an adult now and I'm taking care of you. You're talking to that inner child or that younger version of you that could not stand up for themselves or protect themselves. And you're saying, I've got you now. I'm drawing a line in the sand. We're going to protect us now, right? That is part of healing, is being able to say, no, I will not engage with that. I will not accept that. This is not okay with me. I am not doing that anymore. I am no longer having sex or sleeping with someone who treats me in XYZ manner, period. And remembering too that tolerating touch that doesn't feel good, like gropey touch, grabby touch, touch that's unwanted, non-consensual touch, creates anger and resentment in women. And if you have a history of being sexually abused, you might be more particularly sensitive to certain kinds of touches and grabbing and groping or lack of consent. So you get to draw a line in the sand without feeling like I'm being too much, I'm being this, I'm being that, because I'm saying no to something about my body. And I know this is a touchy subject. It's one that I've talked about quite a few times on the podcast, and that's why I'm going to be playing a couple of those episodes for you here in just a moment. But I wanted to just add this pre-show commentary to add some different context around this, that you can start healing your body and sexual past by drawing boundaries in your relationship now, and by saying, no, this does not work for me. And no, I do not want that. Without the guilt, without the shame, and realize that if you're with someone that is abusive, they are not going to take no for an answer. And I have sadly worked with so many women who would say to me, I just have to give in and do it just to keep him off my back. That hurts my soul and my guts just to hear women saying stuff like that. That they feel like it's just easier to give in and just put up with it and just like lay there and succumb to it because it's easier than the aftermath of what happens if they say no. That right there is sexual abuse. If you feel like you need to do something because you're avoiding a certain consequence that you're scared of or that you know is coming if you say no, that's exactly what sexual abuse is. Sexual coercion. So let's dive into these episodes. If you need to pause it, take a break. I understand that this could be very triggering. So if something comes up for you from your past through listening to this, you're having some intense emotional reactions to this, or it's bringing up something, please seek support. And don't go it alone. Don't try and figure this out alone. Get support from someone who has the credentials, who has the experience, who has the background to help you move through this so you can clear it. But just remember, you're not going to be able to do that within this current dynamic. You can begin the healing journey with boundaries, with saying no, but you're not going to be able to fully open up into vulnerability when you're in a relationship you feel you have to constantly protect yourself from. All right, so let's dive into these episodes. Welcome to the Awakening Women podcast. I'm your host, Leanne Oaten, and for almost a decade, I have been a transformation coach and therapist. This podcast is all about lifting the veil of consciousness and awakening to the truth. It is also about helping you to raise the bar in all areas of your life and relationships by starting with you. If you're ready to take back your personal power and reclaim your life, you have come to the right place. I'm so glad that you're here, so let's get started with today's episode. In this episode, we're chatting about something a little more on the serious end of things, and I take this very seriously because I think it is a widespread issue and it becomes more of a severe issue when women are in abusive relationships. And this is the pressure and coercion toward engaging in sexual acts that they don't really want to engage in. So this is a big topic. Again, there's a spectrum here as far as it goes with consent. Like fully consenting means I'm fully into this thing and I consent these acts or not these acts. I'm consenting to open my body up and I'm there, mind, body, spirit, at least to the best of my ability, right? Like you're open to the thing. And so there's different severities of this because it can go all the way from obviously forced sexual assault, rape, and being in a relationship where you feel pressured, manipulated, guilted. You get threats. If you don't comply or give them what they need, they may withhold money or love or affection or whatever. Silent treatment. That is all abuse and it is coercive behavior. So we have to be able to differentiate between I'm just not really in the mood tonight and maybe they're putting the moves on you and you kind of get there and change your mind. Not that. It's more they keep hounding you and pressuring you and guilting you and making you feel bad, or they just keep going with pursuing it when you're not really there and you don't want to do it. And so you oftentimes just give in to avoid the fight, to get a few days of relief without the pressure, to, keep the peace, all of that. And I just really want to go on record to say that when we do this, we are abusing ourselves. We are self-abuse to open up sexually like that when nothing within you wants to do that. So when that happens, you're not giving your full consent. So consent is a big one. So it can happen in healthy relationships where maybe you feel kind of weird about stopping in the middle of something, or you're not really quite sure how to raise it in the midst of an act. And so you perhaps would bring it up later. That's different. And then hopefully your partner would just be like, whoa, okay, I didn't know that. Thank you for telling me that. It won't happen again, or we won't do that again. There needs to be healthy communication around it. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you're in a relationship with someone who uses sexual coercion and who uses the coercive behaviors around guilt trips, pressure, manipulation, threats to get it elsewhere, withholding of money, love, attention, time, the silent treatment, all of those things, right? It could be you're laying in bed and you are not wanting to be intimate and it starts a big fight. So you're up till 1 a.m. fighting and going on and on and on. And then you think, God, I should have just given into it and shut him up so he'd go to sleep, right? That, again, like that is not, it's intense. And partly, I'm speaking from some personal experience around this. And I work with lots of women who are experiencing this. And it has to stop. You do not owe your husband, boyfriend, anyone your body if you are not fully into it. Does that mean sometimes you're not going through the motions and doing it just as a means of connection, or maybe you're not fully there and you get into it and you feel connected with them after, sure, like that can happen too. You might not be in the mood and then you get there. That's different. You're still fully consenting. But if there's any part of you that is like, I really don't want to do this and I'm feeling pressured and I'm doing it to keep the peace or get him off my back or get a few days of peace where he's not going to keep bringing up how many days it's been or how he has needs or how he's going to get it somewhere else, that is crossing the line, and you have every right to have that physical boundary of, I'm not going to have sex with someone who treats me in these ways. I will not do it. And with this stuff going on, I cannot give my full consent to sexual activity and intimacy with someone who mentally twists things, who calls me names, who gives me the silent treatment, who doesn't listen to me, who doesn't care how I feel, who doesn't care to listen to what I have to say, to someone who makes me feel crazy and makes me feel horrible about myself. Like, eventually you're not going to want to be intimate with someone like that. And that is your body's wisdom saying, no fucking way. We're not going there. But then you bypass that and just allow it. And so then it becomes in that murky, it's sexual coercion, and it's coercive because it's manipulation that makes you do something that you don't fully actually want to do. I have also heard from women over the years that it could be the opposite, where they're the ones that are wanting that connection because it's something they need, that they want, but that the other person is withholding it or not wanting it or rejecting them. So it could go both ways, but I would say across the board, the majority of it is it's the opposite. It's the woman who is closing down and shutting down. Her body is not receptive to their partner's touch or even being near them or wanting to be close and intimate. So I just really wanted to bring this up because this is so prevalent in these abusive narcissistic relationships. And it is harmful for you. It causes you sexual trauma that's going to take you a long time to rewire. And it starts with setting those boundaries now when you're in the relationship, as you are planning your exit and working toward getting out. You're allowed to say, we're not having a sexual relationship, or I'm not comfortable with these particular things, or I'm comfortable with this but not that, and really standing firm in that and not allowing their manipulation to coerce you into doing things you do not want to do. That could be sexual acts. It could just be the act itself. It could be touch. It could be hugs. It could be anything. You have to be able to fully consent for it to be consensual. And if it's not, then it is bordering into sexual abuse. And I think many women can be in these relationships and not realize that these behaviors are actually categorized as sexual abuse under the coercive behaviors. And that can be a shock when you realize that, and you know that it doesn't feel right, and you know it feels disrespectful and degrading, and that, it's a lack of reverence for you, and that's why it doesn't feel good. It's crossing a boundary. And I just feel heartbroken when I hear stories of women and even young girls go through this. Teen girls can go through this where they feel pressured and they just give in and just let it happen. That is, my God, self-neglect, self-betrayal, self-rejection, self-abuse to do that. And so the message here today is you are the owner of your body and all parts within it. And on the outside of it, you are the owner of your body. So you get to choose who is allowed to touch you and where and when. And you're in charge of saying no and standing in your no. And if you have someone that is forcing the issue and you feel uncomfortable, then you pick up and you call the police. I know it might seem extreme, but someone who has that kind of behavior and makes you feel pressured, if it starts getting to the point where you are being abused, you're being yelled at, you're being screamed at, things are escalating, you're feeling afraid, then you call the police. And I can bet you that that will stop in its tracks, right? Because as soon as that has been brought into the equation, they're very less likely to go in that direction again.
Time's almost up on holiday shopping, and so are amazing deals at Amazon. You'll save so much on early holiday athletic gifts, like bikes, tents, and outdoor gear. You'll have money left over for heated gloves for those chilly morning jogs. Or that Pro Series 2-person sled with titanium alloy skis. Oh, what fun it is to save. Shop new deals, added every day.
Right? So if you ever feel unsafe, where you're being intimidated, yelled, screamed, raged, things are being thrown, and hopefully not, but if it gets physical in any way, do not just gloss it over. You pick up the phone and you call and you report it so it's on record. It is not your job to protect someone who is harming you in any way. It's not your job to do that. And you don't have to feel guilty for secretly behind the scenes working on your exit plan and setting those boundaries and limits to no, I'm not going to do that with you. And many women have a lot of guilt around that and they feel bad around that. But you have to really look at the fact that they are not feeling bad for how they are impacting you and how they are making you feel. They're not thinking about how is this behavior making her feel, that she's saying, I don't want to engage sexually with you. And it's a matter of like, oh, well, I'm going to withhold this, or I'm going to punish you in this other way. So hopefully this gave you some insight into coercion and consent when it comes to sexual intimacy. And maybe you have just discovered something that you haven't been able to put words to or make sense of, and this has affirmed something for you. You could be feeling all kinds of emotions and stuff coming up as a result. So again, I highly suggest getting the right support to help you work through this. If you're having really intense reactions or flashbacks or something that's not allowing you to continue on with your day in a productive way, maybe book a session with your trauma therapist, someone that specializes in trauma. If you'd like to get coaching, then reach out to me and we can chat about how to do that. All right, in the next segment, we're diving into if you have a history of sexual abuse in your childhood and how that impacts your intimate relationships and plays a role in the trauma cycle that's going on in your relationship. So again, trigger warning, sensitive material, listen to this mindfully, take breaks, turn it off if it's starting to create any negative reactions within you. And keep an open mind with this and realize that if it does bring up something, it just means that it's touching on something that maybe have been hidden, repressed, and just really ignored. And you can use this as a doorway to your next level of healing, because the first step in anything is having clarity and understanding of the problem. All right, so let's dive into part 2 of this episode now. So before I dive into this episode, I just want to preface and say that this could be triggering when you're talking about sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse, and dynamics that might be present in your relationship. If you're like 90% of women, I poll on my Instagram. I just did a poll asking how many women are experiencing sexual coercion in the form of pressure, guilting, shaming, unwanted physical touch, and feeling obligated to engage in sexual acts with their partner, even though they don't feel safe or like they want to. So it turns into a sexual aversion situation. So if you feel like this might be too triggering for you, I'm going to let you know now so that you can turn it off and maybe save it for another time. But I want to touch on this because this is not something that is talked about near enough. In fact, I've never heard anyone address it as it pertains to adult relationships, living in a narcissistically abusive relationship. and the link to past trauma. If you have sexual abuse in your childhood that is still living on within you, that is being triggered in the now in the abuse dynamic while you're also being sexually abused in the relationship. And sexual abuse doesn't have to mean forced sexual activity. This is not what it's all about. Now, I know some women do experience that, and that's horrible and horrific, but I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the stuff that is harder to witness and identify as being sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and sexual coercion in a relationship, because you think because you're married that this is just normal. But it's not. It should never feel off-putting and uncomfortable and anxiety-provoking and like you have a sense of dread when you think about going into sexual acts with your partner. And so what can happen with these men is you may have divulged early on that you had sexual abuse in your history, childhood sexual abuse perhaps. And so that keeps getting brought up that you need to go deal with that because I have needs, and you act like it's just, off-putting that I have these needs. But really what it is that you don't feel safe to open up in that vulnerable way because you've been shown that you're not emotionally safe. And this definitely triggers your past trauma, because when you've experienced something like that in your childhood, that is highly, highly traumatic and damaging, and it does skew the way that you see things. And so you need to make sure you have a partner you feel fully safe with emotionally. And if you're in this type of relationship, you're not experiencing that emotional safety. And so we have to look at that and go, okay, so maybe there's some truth to this, that I need to heal my sexuality and heal from the past. But there's no way I'm going to be able to do it within the dynamics of this relationship. Because all it's doing is digging up those traumatic feelings every time you're feeling guilted and shamed and obligated and pressured into sexual acts that you do not want. It's going to bring up those past feelings in your childhood that you had at the time when this was happening to you, and you felt pressured and coerced and forced, and so much shame within that. This is a big topic, and if you have this in your past, it is definitely a very good idea to find a trauma specialist or someone who specializes in helping you talk through and work through some of this on your own, not with your partner, of course. But that is something, that is your own healing journey, and being aware of how your past does impact the present is important, because if you leave this relationship and go into another one, you're going to need to know that some of this stuff might come with you, but you need to make sure that you are with someone that can provide that emotional safe space for you and understanding, and that's not going to use the things that happen to you to manipulate and get what they want. So I've done other episodes on this here on the podcast. I will link those up in the show notes, where I've really gone into some examples of what sexual coercion looks like in a relationship. But the key thing is that you should never, ever feel uncomfortable sexually around your partner. And if you do, it's very easy to feel like it's your fault because your partner is telling you it is. And they make you feel like shit if you say no, or they make you feel like there's something wrong with you because you're not turned on by them or you have no desire. And so I posted about this again on Instagram about, let me just see if I can pull this. So I posted, you can have sexual healing to do and not be able to do it within an emotionally unsafe relationship. And what I do end up getting from time to time is someone who will say, well, what about a partner, a man that's withholding from a woman as a form of control and sexual abuse? That is less common. I don't hear that near as much. And we really need to clarify that the two are not the same thing, because when a woman, that's basically saying then that a woman who is shut down sexually and doesn't want sexual physical contact is intentionally withholding as a manipulation control tactic. And that's what many women are told by their partner, that you're just trying to control and withhold. And that it doesn't come from that kind of energy for most women. It comes from, I just physically cannot. I've heard of women talking about crying after or feeling really sick after because they forced themselves to do something their body is saying no to. So if you have a partner that is withholding as a form of abuse and control, that is different than a woman that is completely shut down from trauma saying, no, I can't, I won't. So what I ended up doing is I did a poll on Instagram just to see how many in relation to what that topic is around, does your partner withhold, or are you experiencing coercion and the sexual abuse and harassment and unwanted touch and all those things. And at this point, and it's been up for 6 hours, the 90% are experiencing a partner who is coercive sexually, and then 10% has the withholding pattern. So just as I had thought, it is less common, not saying it doesn't happen and that it's not difficult and painful and feels rejecting and opens up all your abandonment wounds and rejection wounds and all that. But the fact of the matter is that it's different, because if you are feeling shut down, I want you to know that it's not because you're trying to be vindictive and controlling. It's because it's the natural response of your body to what you've been experiencing. And you need to start listening to that. And you need to start setting boundaries accordingly, physically. And you're allowed to do that. I think when you've been with someone for a long enough time, you just start to believe that, well, it's my obligation. I need to meet his needs. He's told me he won't be able to stay if I don't meet his needs, or he's going to find somewhere else to get them met. And you start to think, well, it's me. There's something wrong with me. And you feel this shame, but you're not actually seeing that you feel this way for a damn good reason, and that he is not entitled to sexual acts and physical touch if he cannot respect you and treat you with honor. And, the abuse itself is the damage, right? That's the damage that has been done that has caused the response of you to shut down. So for the purpose of sticking to the point of what I want to talk about here is, if you have sexual abuse in your history and you start to think, well, the problems I'm having now in my marriage or relationship is because of my past. So therefore it's a me issue. So there could be that. And so there could be that you have some healing to do around that for sure, but also that you won't be able to do it within the dynamic that you're experiencing. There's no way you can heal from something that deep, that goes that deep, to be violated in that way as a child. You cannot do that with someone who you feel unsafe with because of how they treat you and how they gaslight you and how they warp your reality and minimize and blame and shift blame and shut down and don't want to talk about how they're hurting you and twist things up to the point where you feel like you're going crazy. You're not going to want to open up sexually. And so there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. What needs to happen here is a very intentional relationship hiatus, some kind of a pause, a break. That doesn't mean you need to leave the relationship right now, but that something needs to happen where you're taking a very intentional pause from all of it so that you can get clear on what your next steps are. Because if you keep just going along and doing for the sake of peace, what you're doing is you're abusing yourself. What you're doing is abandoning yourself and your inner child that's wanting you to protect them now, because you can. You're an adult now. You can protect that little girl that didn't have someone watching out for her. So now you can be that for her, to say, no, you're not entitled to my body. This is mine. My breasts are not yours. My vagina is not yours. You are not entitled to any of it. You're not entitled to grope and grab and grind me. You're not entitled to sex because you crave it and you want it so badly when I'm feeling repulsed by it. And that doesn't mean that you're broken. It does mean you have some healing, and that you need to make sure in a future relationship that you are with someone that is safe, but the onus is not all on you. So I just wanted to really address that specific issue head on. If you have sexual abuse in your history, in your childhood, and you have a partner that is trying to insinuate, or maybe he outright says, this isn't about me. You need to go deal with your own past because I can't wait around for this and this isn't working for me, or blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, they are continuing to abuse you emotionally and psychologically. Okay, so this might have been a lot. Maybe it confirmed some things for you. Maybe you learned some new things, or you've had a moment of awakening listening to this, to really what is going on in your relationship. It can be quite shocking to realize that you're being sexually abused in a marriage. You might not have known before that that actually is a thing. And you may not have known why you felt so horrible and anxious and put off and panicky around this area. And now maybe you have some new awareness that's giving you some hope, because now you can move forward. You can have another layer of understanding of the dynamic. And if you're wondering, am I experiencing narcissistic abuse, or is this just maybe an unhealthy sexual relationship that can be changed, then I recommend that you head to number 1, my Relationship Clarity Bootcamp. It goes into what are the patterns that are happening within an abusive dynamic. So you can get that clarity and even maybe put it to the side. If that's not happening, then maybe it is an isolated sexual relationship thing that you need to heal with your partner. The second is the No More Toxic Cycles video class that gives you clarity on covert abuse and the cycle and the dynamics that are at play within it. You can get both of those on-demand resources for very low cost at the link in my show notes here, and you can get more clarity around the overall dynamic, because sexual issues happening in isolation, well, I think that probably, I almost want to say, when it comes to women, there's a huge relational component to this. I think you can have had sexual traumas in the past, but if you're with someone who is safe for you, that you feel attracted to, that you feel safe around, that you can work through with this, then you can work through that. But when you're not, then it just brings up what's already not working within the relationship. And so it's a good idea to have a very good 360 view, a bird's eye view of the entire dynamic as a whole picture, and the patterns. So those 2 resources are your next steps if you want to get more clarity on, is this really what's going on? Can it be fixed? Is this something I can work on with my partner through boundaries and expressing my needs? You're going to have much more clarity once you get through those resources. So again, those are in the show notes of this episode. All right, that's it for this one, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take good care. Bye for now.